Thank you all for tuning in to learn more about the effects of the pandemic. Tonight, we're focusing on education. We want to explore what is happening to education during the pandemic and ways it could be forever altered. Our guests are two education leaders joining us via Skype. Margaret McKenna is chair of the Boston Human Rights Commission, a former member of the state's Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, and president emerita of Lesley University. Thank you for joining us. And Thabiti Brown is head of school at Codman Academy Charter Public School in Dorchester. Thank you for joining us as well, Thabiti. I'm Kathleen McNerney, the editor of WBUR's education team, Edify. The purpose of these town halls is to highlight an issue for you, our viewers and listeners, to have your questions answered. This is not a debate, and we're hoping to present information that allows you to better understand the topic. We'll try our best to bring several different perspectives forward during this discussion, and we are taking questions at slido.com. The event code is WBUR VTH6. That's V as in virtual T Town Hall 6. WBUR VTH6. We've already had a lot of great questions submitted, so we will try to get to as many as we possibly can. Don't forget to subscribe to the WBUR YouTube channel to get notified anytime we release a new video. You can also click the bell icon right next to the subscribe button if you want to be notified whenever we go live. Also, check out the YouTube live chat to talk to others who are watching and exchange ideas. Margaret McKenna and Thabiti Brown, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
It's good to be here.
Wonderful to join you tonight.
So obviously a lot has happened in the last 2 months. I'm wondering if Thabiti, if we could start with you, what's the toughest story that you've heard from students, families, or teachers during this period?
Yeah, I mean, this is a time period where I think so many members of the world community are suffering. And I think either from the virus itself or from collateral damage with families, with lost jobs, and the like. And I think that that's been very true for members of the Codman community as well. We have the same thing happening. So folks who are out of work and folks who are missing family members, who have lost family members, who are currently sick. To be honest, I think the hardest stories that I've heard are mostly coming from our seniors who are telling their life narratives as part of a tradition at Codman that we call the senior talk, where they're describing pieces of life that have been challenging for them, obstacles and ways in which they've overcome. This is all through their senior talk initiative, a senior talk project, which they deliver now digitally, usually in person, but it's now being delivered digitally. And those stories, I think, just underscore the point that inequities and difficulties and obstacles have faced our community from before this pandemic hit. And to say that the stories that students are talking about adversity they face in their lives, it's actually often harder than the adversity they're facing now, just speaks to their resilience and their beauty, and these majestic stories about overcoming and about taking next steps in life, which I think I really admire and appreciate. So it's not only hard now, but it's been hard, and it will continue to be hard. I appreciate the resilience that I'm seeing right now.
Margaret, what about you?
Well, there's two things that come to mind. The first is a boy, 10, 11, sitting in a car so he could access the internet. It's 2020, and we have places in Boston where you cannot access the internet. I found that appalling, that it isn't because people haven't bought it, it's because you literally didn't have access. So, the Boston Public Schools dropped 160 hotspots so families could access the internet. So if we're going online to have school, and never mind that you don't have the equipment, you just don't have access. So I thought that was pretty startling. The other thing is, we're talking in this country about having 1 out of every 7 people hungry. We're down to 1 out of 5. And one of the stories that I found really set me back was college students who had organized to go to farms to pick up potatoes and lettuce and green beans that were going to waste because they couldn't get them to market and they didn't have any way of selling them. And I thought, what is wrong with this country that we have to depend on volunteers to go get food to give to people that need it? So there's enough food, there's just not the will or the logistics to bring the food to the people that need it. I just thought that was, it is, what's wrong with us? Why can't we make this happen? There's enough food and there are hungry people. So is it the political will? We know how to do it. Why aren't we doing it?
Yeah, I mean, it shows the breadth of this moment, right? And the structural challenges that have already existed. I keep thinking about how we knew about inequities before, and this has just strained, many people who were already under duress and systems that were already not working for a lot of people. And yet, as Thabiti said, there are these bright spots of resilience and growth in spite of it all.
Well, culturally, we're a country who were happy with racing to the top. That's what we were living with. And people sort of took that to heart, race to the top. Mm-hmm. But did anybody think about, as we're racing to the top, what was happening to all the other people who were in the middle or the bottom? And, I love the fact that we go around in Massachusetts saying we're number one. Mm-hmm. But we're also number 1 or 2 in the achievement gap, the opportunity gap. No one says that. And I think it's embarrassing in Massachusetts that we're number 1 and we keep pushing that. We want to be better, we want better. And at the same time, our achievement gap is growing. And we have so many resources. We should be the model in the country to close that achievement gap, but we're not.
Yeah, I want to probe that achievement gap in just a little bit, but I'm wondering, with the pandemic and with what I think most people have experienced of remote learning is uneven at best, do you worry, could part of a generation or a whole generation of students get left behind because of the moment that we're in and how the response has been? I don't really know who the boogeyman is, but Thabiti, I don't know if you worry about the generational effect on the students right now.
Yeah, I mean, we are in a moment where it's going to really test our mettle as educators. I think policymakers, government officials, leaders across business. Are we interested in investing fully in our young people to help them to grow and develop, or are we not? When I hear some policymakers say, we can't test everybody on a regular basis because it's just too expensive, I just want to call BS on that and say that is not actually an option. If we want to have our young people in school buildings on a regular basis, we want families to be able to get to their jobs. If we want that learning to happen, we have to invest. Now is the time to spend those dollars. So I am deeply concerned that lack of sort of long-term vision of what the investment now needs to be is going to lead to increasing gaps. And, I see some of those gaps already. I have colleagues and friends whose children are in independent schools where they are seeing 6-7 hours of online experiences with their educators on a daily basis, still a couple hours of homework at night. And, they don't have any of these structural barriers that many of our young people are facing, either housing insecurity, food challenge, difficulty with accessing the internet. These are not structures they're facing, and they're going to be fine, right? And so the questions are, do we have the moral will to actually then, greenlight those investments to make sure that Black and brown children, low-income folks across the country, rural cities, have those investments so that we can also make sure that we are closing those gaps. I'm deeply concerned about that.
Yeah.
I am too, and I think one of the things is the English language learners. I mean, 40% of of Boston kids are English language learners. Their first language is other than English. And until a year ago, we had a mandate, English-only mandate. We were the only state in the United States that still had that English-only mandate, which means we were not doing bilingual education. And I think it's one of the reasons that our achievement gap is as large as it is, that we have not done what other states have done, which is address this English language learners. And we have to do that, and we haven't done it.
Yeah, I want to bring up some charts that we have, on that point. One marker is the MCAS, the state high stakes test. WBUR has a data tool on our website, wbur.org/edify, where you can see the 10th grade MCAS scores for the last decade. And some of the comparisons are really stunning. I want to bring up a comparison of all students statewide versus ELL students statewide, if you can see. And what you'll see on this chart as we're bringing it up. So here on the left is all students. In 10th grade math MCAS, just as an example. And on the right, you'll see English language learners and former English language learners. The green shades on the top indicate an advanced or proficient score, while the orange and red on the bottom indicate needs improvement or warning failing scores. You can't compare year to year because of changes in the test and changes in how they were scored. But you can see that trend, that those gaps are really staggering, how dramatic that difference is. And we know from research at virtual academies, both nationally and the 2 virtual academies that we have in Massachusetts, there was an Inspector General's report that students with who are English language learners or who have a disability are not often served well by online virtual academies. And what they're getting right now is not even online learning, it's crisis learning. So the question is, as you're rolling this out, how are schools able to meet all of those varied needs while they are also trying to meet fundamental needs like food and housing, or just stress and trauma of the family, that for some students home isn't a safe place, and that's where they're stuck right now. Thabiti, I don't know if you would have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll say that I'm in awe of the community of educators who are tackling this problem right now across our city, across our state. Because this is not what we signed up for, right? We actually are all learning how to deliver in this model that is not a model that most of us have been taught in. And so these gaps that you're naming in English language learners are real. At Codman, we have a number of wonderful staff who are spending their full days basically in these small group instruction rooms in classrooms on Zoom, supporting students who are learning English. They're then doing small group instruction with folks and then making calls afterwards to try to get folks to get understanding. I've been in a classroom where the materials are translated in multiple languages. Students are asking for additional support in that space, and we are doing our best to deliver. And these are folks who have, in the last 6 weeks, flipped a switch from in-person to rebuilding basically their entire way of delivering content, instruction, and engaging young people. And so I'm in awe of that. And also, I hear their pleas, which are, show me how to do this better. Who's figured this out? Where can we see examples of amazing English language learning instruction in this particular style of educating? And then teach me how to do that. Maybe there's somebody in the same school who's doing that well. Get me in touch with those folks. Maybe there's something to deliver at the state level. I think our ability to identify those best practices, to seek out educators who've been doing this well, and then to export those within the state and then within the city and then internally at each school is going to tell us how fast we can grow. My concern is that no matter how good people are right now and how much they want to learn, the gap in being able to do it well is just so large right now that we got to figure out some other solutions. I have some ideas I can keep sharing on those, but educators are working their tails off right now to try to get this done. I'm just really working hard.
Is anybody, and I don't know if Margaret, you have heard, is anybody doing this particularly well, even across the nation right now?
Well, I'm not sure in terms of, there are some online schools that were online before this. I mean, they've been fully online for years. And I'm sure there are some schools that are doing it well. But this is not, the pedagogy is totally different. This is not taking what you do in the classroom and putting it online. It is a totally different pedagogy, and you have to learn how to do it. And I agree that this is a big lift, and teachers really are frustrated because they want to do well and they want to learn best practices, and they haven't had the opportunity to do that. And we owe them that. Mm-hmm. And do we know how to do it? The answer is yes, we do, because colleges have whole programs and people there that's what they do, is they teach how to teach online. And it is a totally different pedagogy. So, this has been going on for 40 years. I mean, where I was for 22 years at Lesley, 40 years ago, we had a master's program in integrating technology into learning goals. So this is not new, but it's not, you're not born with the ability to do that. Somebody has to help you figure out how to do that. And now we've got to figure out how to get this knowledge and best practices to the teachers who are doing this.
Yeah. For those of us, I just want to take a moment to say, for those who are just joining us now, we are live in WBUR's virtual town hall with Margaret McKenna, President Emerita of Lesley University, and Thabiti Brown, Head of School at Codman Academy Charter Public School in Dorchester. Remember, you can submit your questions at slido.com using the code WBURVTH6. And you can also share your experience. What has worked well? What hasn't during pandemic education? Are you supplementing your kids' learning? Are you giving up trying to keep up with video classes and worksheets? What are you worried about when in-person classes return? Go to slido.com, use the code WBURVTH6. I'm wondering, Thabiti, if you can speak just from your experience, why was it so hard for schools to make this shift? As Margaret points out, we've had online learning. It's been out there for years. There has been pedagogy and research about this. So is this a case where schools weren't investing in technology sooner, that they were slow to adopt technology to prepare for a moment like this? What were the barriers? What made it so challenging?
This is unlike anything we've seen before, and I think I've heard that again and again. It's a generational moment. I know of many folks across the city of Boston and the state who have invested heavily in technology, right? Who have said, listen, our children are not growing up in a world where paper and pencil is the way. It is about internet and communication. It's about coding. It's about investing in these ways of using digital resources to then learn, to grow, and then to engage. And so, all of our students have Chromebooks at Codman Academy, and there's iPads that are available. And but I want to just underscore what Margaret said a little while ago. The pedagogy for teaching really well in an online environment is different than that you're doing in person. And so we actually, many of us have just been, again, working really hard to deliver on the in-person, right? And it's a different beast. And so when we say, did we not prepare well enough? I think we prepared for what we had, which was a limited number of young people who were getting this kind of distance learning experience, and then a few courses. We didn't prepare for 5-year-olds sitting at home with their parents over a full school day, trying to engage in math and science and social studies and literacy. That's not what we know how to do yet. And so I think even the best of us are still scrambling and working hard to figure out how to close those gaps in knowledge.
Yeah. Can you explain a little bit more, I think just for people who aren't teachers or aren't doing this work, why doesn't it translate online? Like what do you have to do differently to make a course or class work successful online?
Yeah, I don't know how many folks have actually been in a classroom that is fully online. So the interface, I think the ones that we've been using, at least, again, maybe there are some more remarkable tools out there. It reminds me of a lecture in many ways, right? It's like now there's one person at a time who's speaking. If you're in a classroom or a space with 25 other folks who are there, they can chat in the chat box, but really it's just one person at a time. They can share their screen and explain ideas. When you go to say, hey, I'm calling on this person to speak, there are all kinds of things that can go wrong in that connection, especially when neither educator nor student is really strong yet at that particular model. And so calling on folks is complicated. There are breakout rooms that we can do in Zoom, and that's better. So there's some small groups, but then you actually need, not like in a classroom, I can actually see the 4 breakout sessions of 4 groups all at the same time and flow between them. Much harder to do as an educator, just jumping into these small rooms where students, again, haven't yet been taught how to do the work within those spaces. And so little things that you're used to in a physical space for proximity are much more complicated in this digital world. And so I think that's the number one. I think number 2, we just don't have practice. So just straight up, if we had been doing this all year long, we'd be at a place where we'd be innovating on it now. I do want to name that and say that there is great opportunity in this moment to innovate and to actually deliver on some of these gap closing, opportunity gap, achievement gap closing experiences that I think we'll want to take with us into the post-pandemic world. We can do better on this. We can learn now and get better. It's going to take a lot more investment than we currently have.
By investment, do you mean financial? What kind of investment? Financial, training?
So I started by saying, testing. I just want to underscore that health has got to be the number one. Our families have been saying to us, I appreciate what y'all are doing. Thank you for calling. Thank you for engaging. I want to tell you now, if I'm not comfortable with my child coming to your school building, they're not going there in September. I just want you to be aware of that. The health is number one. And so do we have the testing? Is there a vaccine? Can we do the contact tracing the way we need to? Thermometers, is that something that's going to help? What about folks who are non-asymptomatic carriers? How do you deal with that? Is the 6 feet thing really real? All of those are real problems that we have not yet figured out. Our classrooms are 20 students on average. If they're going to be 10 in the future, what does that look like? So health, we got to invest there. Second is we got to figure out, we got to make sure that the tech needs are all met. We talked about having Chromebooks and internet access. That's all important. We also got to send supplies home. Are the books available so students can have those in the classroom? Do they have, crayons and paper, and do they have those materials to build with? We're not just a paper and pencil or computer school. We're also talking about projects and project-based learning. So how do you do that? Get those materials to folks. We're talking heavily about basic needs. So we talked about food. We talked about clothing and housing insecurity. We got to meet those needs for folks before we can even get to the place of getting good, learning experiences. So, and then we got to invest in professional development for teachers and make sure that they feel good about the work that they're doing, and that they're able to deliver high quality classrooms, both in person and also online. It's a lot of investment.
And I agree. And I think that we want to differentiate between teachers know how to use technology. Most teachers now integrate technology, but that's different than teaching totally online. It's not like teachers don't have technology and don't use technology with the students. They do, but it's a different world when you're just teaching online. I want to add something else, though, when we're talking about the achievement gap, is we know there are a few things that work to close the achievement gap, a few things that evidence shows make a difference. One is quality preschool. Another is summer learning, so we get rid of summer learning loss, attendance, and food. And in this state, we're 50th out of 51 in terms of early childhood. And we're first or second in terms of expense for childcare. So on both ends, where accessibility is terrible. So we have such a long way to go. And we do not, for some reason, we have not seen preschool. Boston started, I went to 4-year-olds, went to 5-year-olds first, full day kindergarten to 5, and to 4-year-olds. Now they're talking about, but there are places in Massachusetts where you don't even have full day kindergarten for 5-year-olds, never mind 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds. But in Kentucky, you can do that.
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, you can do that. That's right. In Tulsa, the Tulsa Project now has and they're working, those Tulsa Project are also working with adult education the same time they're working with those kids. So, I always get, when people say the achievement gap, one of the reasons we have this achievement gap is we start too late. And, and we treat people equally when they enter kindergarten or first grade. Well, equality doesn't equal equity. These kids are not coming to us as monoliths. They're coming to us from all different states of what they know and where they come from. And so we have to start a lot earlier, and we have to treat individual kids what they need, which is not the same. So we have a long way to go to recognize that and to do what needs to be done if we really are serious about closing the achievement gap.
Yeah, we have a question from Slido on early education. The question is, how can we meet the needs of preschoolers? Virtual learning doesn't meet their social, emotional, or developmental needs. How do we go forward?
Yeah, we were just talking about this today as we were trying to do our planning for the new school year, which is it's really about hitting a moving target, right? But our 4-year-olds, I think, are very, very great at learning hands-on. They're great at learning within a play environment. We have these wonderful experiences within the classroom. We have these block rooms. We have these great natural play areas, and we can tailor our curricula to those experiences. We are fortunate to have exceptional educators in our early childhood program who have been putting together packets, materials, supplies, and then literally driving the kids' houses and dropping them off and saying, these are the pieces of hands-on engaged elements that are going to help you with your literacy, that's going to help you with your mathematics. Please use them. And so that's one way we are trying to sort of attempt to engage. I think for the future, we're thinking that's the group, right? Starting with our youngest that are likely, we got to figure out how to get those folks in the building because it's the hardest. It's not these platforms are really geared towards adults and older children. It's the hardest to reach them. And so we are likely working hard to make sure that they are our priorities for getting them in the building because we know that, and Margaret McKenna just said this, if we're not thoroughly educating our youngest, their foundation won't be strong. If their foundation is not strong, we're spending the rest of their career catching them up. So those are the folks we got to make sure we're investing more heavily in.
Yeah. And obviously, as you can see, I have small children as I'm sitting in the playroom with arts and crafts activities and puzzles and board games behind me. I have a 4 and a 2-year-old, and, thinking about what they need developmentally while also trying to manage the things for our family. And we're very lucky. We, my husband and I both still have jobs, and we have a house, and it's still tough. It's tough to try to create that play and those opportunities for just exploration and creativity. And there's also great things that we can bake bread together. But it's not the same as kind of the learning environment. I know the 4-year-old definitely misses school, and I miss school too.
If there's one or two good things that have come out of this, I think one, I hope, is a respect for teachers and what they do and how hard that job is. I mean, I grew up in a family of teachers. My mom and dad both taught their whole lives in public school. And I have a son who's a teacher and a daughter-in-law who's a teacher. And I'm a lawyer by training, a civil rights lawyer, and I substitute taught. And it was the hardest thing I ever did in my life. I had fourth graders, and I was trying to reason with them. If you do this, I'll do this. I was negotiating. Forget it. I mean, I was like, I don't know how you people do this. I do not understand. It is the hardest thing I've ever seen, right? So I have so much respect because I grew up with it, and I tried it for a little bit. I was like, and I think people who have been at home and have seen what it's like, right? It's tough. It is really hard. The whole idea of teaching a child how to read is a science and an art, right? And it's a mystery, right? It's a science and an art, and learning how to do that. I mean, it's a miracle, I think, that teachers perform every day, and they're really skilled. And I hope people have recognized it. And the second thing I hope that people have learned in this period of time is have seen the disparities in the haves and the have-nots, mm-hmm. and how different, both in health and in education, access, how different the access is in our world to all of the above. Because, like, who's getting sick and who's dying, and who's got, who has access to the internet and has 3 computers in their home, and who's able to work at home and who's not. So I hope both of those things stick with us longer than us talking tonight. Mm-hmm. It's terrible, but oftentimes something good or bad happens, and then a month later, it's gone. So I hope we remember those things, that when we're approving budgets and we're going to vote, that we remember these things, how important they are to our lives and to the lives of our children, or in my case, my granddaughter. So I hope it sticks.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I want to go into some of the opportunities, and especially budgets, with the landmark education budget formula law that was passed last year. For those of us who are just joining now, we are live in WBUR's virtual town hall with Margaret McKenna, President Emerita of Lesley University, and Thabiti Brown, Head of School at Codman Academy Charter Public School in Dorchester. Remember, you can submit your questions at slido.com. It's obviously been a long day for me. Using the code WBUR VTH6. That's slido.com, WBUR VTH6. There's a question here on Slido from Scott Wellman. Is the $1 billion plus program for improving education in the state at risk? Could you discuss the implications to present students and the next generation? So, Margaret and Thabiti, as you know very well, the state passed this big landmark legislation updating the education funding formula. A lot of schools that needed and were underfunded for years, decades, were supposed to be getting more funding, but there's no dedicated revenue stream for that funding. So I don't know who wants to take it or try to cast a crystal ball of is this funding at risk, because now there is just so much need. We know that municipal budgets and school budgets are really under strain right now.
Do we have a third option? Call the governor?
I mean, Thabiti, how have your budgets been affected? How are you sort of planning for next fiscal year?
Yeah, I am, to put it mildly, worried about the investments that were promised by this legislation. Frankly, investments that 5 years ago, the Foundation Budget Review Commission said it should have been made 5 years ago. And so where it's late, and I was very excited about this first stage of implementation over a 5-year plan that now likely is pushed back indefinitely. I don't want to undersell this. Although we spend X number of dollars on our children in the state, we need to be spending exponentially more than that if we're really serious about investing in the future. I think as a country, we've shown time after time that we're not actually serious about that investment. And so what we're seeing now is the strong likelihood that those Student Opportunity Act dollars will not come in this next year, and likely not in the year after either. And so this, again, 5 years ago investment is not coming our way. We had earmarked those dollars at Codman to spend specifically on getting more tutors and then more specialists to be working in smaller groups with young people to help to grow their understanding and their skill. And that's what we thought. This is the best way to make sure that we are getting our English language learners, getting our students who need particular literacy support, getting our special needs students, getting them the supports that they need. We can't invest those dollars now. And so that's not okay. And I know that we're seeing, catastrophic downturns in a lot of places. I also know that, this is a country where the top 1% own, 60% plus of the wealth of the country, and they're fine. And so we can do better on it. And I encourage anybody on this call to yes, reach out to your government officials, make some noise about this, send those letters, be activists, because we can't actually just sit idly by while we watch nothing happen again for young people, and then particularly low income, particularly Black and brown, particularly in cities and rural environments where we were underfunded to begin with.
And I second all of that. Is this $1 billion over the next 5 years were not enhancements. They were filling in what should have been done 10 years ago, and were not done. And it's not an asset model. It was a deficit model. It was filling in the deficits where we should have filled in a long time ago. So it's really unfortunate. It's not like, okay, it's $1 billion and we're not going to be able to do these extra things. No, it's filling in the losses that we're not going to be able to do it, and it's going to make the achievement gap larger, and we can't afford to do that. We'll lose this generation. It's just, we can't afford to do that.
Yeah, and I was struck a couple of weeks ago at the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education meeting. Education Commissioner Jeff Riley said, and I quote, "There is an opportunity to change how we think about education. There's an opportunity to think about how do we personalize education a little bit more than we're currently doing." So at the same time as this is such a challenging transition, as many people have told me time and time again, we are building the plane as we are flying it. There could be a really nice moment to think about how to engage students and how to reach students in a different way. I'm wondering, Thabiti, how are you seeing that play out? What are you seeing as the opportunities to sort of lift all boats and to really address all students in a better and more personalized way?
And I appreciate Commissioner Riley's push there, because I think that's the space we all need to sit in that we can't sit idly by while this happens. We actually have to be proactively engaged in making positive change to better the lives of our young people. And so what he's saying, and I wholeheartedly agree with this, is where is the opportunity to get deeper into the goals of your particular institution? At Codman, that is about growing students to be really strong academically, to be very healthy, mental health, physical health, and frankly, to be social justice warriors, to go out and change the world for the better. For us, we're looking closely at, well, what are the key core components of our programming that we can deliver in remote learning, that we can deliver consistently over the course of a year, that if we're shut down at various times over the year or next 2 years, we can still deliver there. And then what are the components that allow for us to do that on an individualized basis? One way for us is thinking about competency-based instruction. And so here's the standard. This is what it looks like in very student-friendly learning target language. I can meet the standard, yes or no. If I can't, here are the structures, supports, opportunities for me to improve my understanding. Here are the educators who can help me with that, my classmates. Here's ways that I can demonstrate that knowledge, not just on an MCAS exam, which is only one measure, but actually out in the world. I'm going to go explain to you how to do this. I'm going to build a playground, showing you my engineering knowledge, whatever those ideas are, but actually putting it to work. And then, hey, great, you met that standard. Now you can move on. There's a great opportunity right now to be different in the way in which we are measuring whether students know what we want them to know. And so I'm excited about that. I know that is daunting in a world where so many of us are frankly just worried about our jobs. We're worried about our health, and we're worried about what the next day is gonna come. And so trying to sit in that space of opportunity and about possibility is what I'm excited about, sort of germinating both in the Codman community, but in all of our education communities. We have to, we don't have a choice. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and because you bring up MCAS, we have another question from Slido. MCAS, of course, was canceled this year, and this would have been the time when they would have been students would have been knuckling down for those bubble tests. Well, I guess they're computerized now. I just dated myself. But with this question from Slido is, with some tests canceled now, could policies change, re-standardized, or high-stakes testing? Opponents have argued they're predictive of only socioeconomic status. I don't know, Margaret, do you think that this could be a moment to rethink MCAS and how much it tells us, or does MCAS remain a useful tool, particularly in the epidemic, of evaluating whether there has been kind of a COVID slide akin to a summer slide?
I think testing or assessments can be useful to tell you how a student is doing, so you can therefore remedy what's missing. I think they've gotten totally out of hand in terms of we're testing, kids at every level all the time, and there's too much teaching to the test. And we are discouraging teachers from being creative because they're spending all their time teaching to the test in so many areas. Not all, but in a lot of areas. And we're discouraging good teachers. And therefore, in some ways, we're discouraging creativity in our children because it's so focused on these tests. So, but having said that, do I think that it will change? Not with the way the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education is today. I don't think so. I don't think that's going to change. But I wish it would, because there's just too much attention to the test. I wish there were alternatives. I mean, I do think Jeff Riley is interested in project-based learning, experiential learning, interested in other ways, competency to show that you've applied the learning and therefore you know it, as opposed to writing it down. You can apply it to a project. And so I would hope portfolios and other ways that you could show that you actually understand the subject matter, rather than spending days filling out bubbles on the computer. So I'm always hopeful, but I'm not optimistic. And I will tell you that the MCAS and the new MCAS, were tested to see if they could predict performance in college, and they can't. They don't predict performance in college, so I don't know what they predict. I've never been a big, as I said, I think it's very useful to have assessments to show how you need to help kids do better. But high stakes tests are anxiety provoking, and you can, from your zip code, you can predict how a child will do in a test in 3rd grade, in an MCAS test in 10th grade, on your SAT and on your LSAT. It sticks around a long time. So it's, I'm not sure what it, how useful it is as opposed to an assessment. So
it's, as we think about coming back in the fall, it's clear there's going to have to be some kind of assessment about where kids are, and they could be coming from different, they just have different levels of learning that has either advanced or not. Another question from Slido: in light of the problems parents face teaching at home, it's likely kids will be at a different points in learning. For example, reading. How will that be addressed? Thabiti, as you're thinking about the fall, how are you thinking of assessing students and trying, are you thinking about catching them up? Are you thinking about holding some back? How do you try to get everyone back on the same page if we're able to be in classrooms in the fall again?
Well, listen,
or even if we're online.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do. Schools are often asked to do the impossible, right? So we have to prepare our young people to be happy and healthy. We got to make sure that they are safe. We have to make sure they're well fed, well clothed. We're mandated reporters if we see things that don't look quite right. I'm thinking a lot with our team. I think a tremendous team at Codman Academy, including our boards and our larger community. We're thinking a lot about what are those a priori needs that have to be met so that students can even begin to approach the good teaching and learning that they need to do, right? And so those needs we have to be well fed in that. So the culture and health and support. So that's one. We're really focused on that and making sure that as much as we can now through the end of June when the school year ends, and then throughout the summer, we are engaging with young people and families to make sure that we are catching any needs that need to be caught and offering supports, and then getting folks to be interpersonally connected. The next stage of that then is, all right, well, let's try to figure out what you do know, young person, at this moment in time. And so we're doing that right now with assessments, and we're saying to folks, if you need more in the summer, we're actually going to make sure that you're getting that in the summer before you return in the fall. Once you return in the fall, like any year, there are gaps within a 20-person classroom across that classroom. I mean, there's this one person who's really great at math. I'm in third grade. I'm on fourth grade level math. But in my reading, I'm only second grade level, right? So that is normal. Our teachers are expert at being able to engage those types of difficulties, those different pieces of different stances of learning. Our teachers are not yet expert at doing that, half in the classroom, half out of the classroom, while we're also trying to figure out how to attend to food needs, housing insecurity, and jobs. And so that mission impossible that we're talking about, I think that's the work we're trying to figure out now. I know there's a task force at DESE that's working on that to try to figure out how to open schools well. I know there are really smart people all over the country trying to nail that down. We'll learn from all those folks, and then we'll try to open. And I think no matter what happens, we're going to ask you. We'll say, Kathleen, show me what you know. If you can show X, we'll go to Y. If you can't show X,
not much.
I got to teach X. So
don't give me math problems, Thabiti.
I can support you, Kathleen. We got a good team.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. And there's a lot going on this summer. Summer learning and summer programs, the summer jobs. There is a lot going on, depending on what the governor and the mayor say. But under the aegis of the mayor, Boston After School Beyond and the PIC and under John Barros, there's a lot of opportunities. They're not the same opportunities as they have been in the past because we have to adjust for safety. And used to be hundreds of kids were hired by businesses who are not going to do that this summer. But we're trying to integrate learning even into jobs. The kids who work in the parks, we're trying to think about, can they learn about the environment while they're in the parks? And can we have kids who are working in their neighborhoods on a project that the neighborhood decides is important, but we would connect it to a sort of service learning. What are you doing? Here's a budget, and in the end, reflect on it. So we're trying to integrate sort of project-based service learning, and work. So there are a group of people working on that very hard to try to figure out how to do this with all of the safety issues involved.
Yeah, I mean, we heard We saw the governor's plan on reopening the economy, and there's going to be more information coming in the coming weeks about day camps, summer camps, daycares. But we still don't know what that looks like. I mean, New York and North Carolina are considering having students come on alternate days as one possibility. You're here Monday, Wednesday, you're here Tuesday, Thursday. Looking at what happens if a teacher doesn't feel safe coming into a school because they're in a high-risk group or they live with somebody in a high-risk group. What if a student doesn't feel comfortable? What if a student gets sick? We have a question here from Slido from Patrick Edema. Parents are wondering what classrooms and playgrounds are going to look like when schools reopen. Can you give us a snapshot of what to expect? I'm wondering, Thabiti, what are the conversations and possibilities that you're trying to plan for, and how much is really out of your control because of as you had said earlier, the health needs have to trump everything?
Listen, I think short of a vaccine that comes online in the summertime and is able to sort of wipe out this pandemic, we're going to see a mixed opening in the fall and likely for the full school year. So when I say mixed, I mean there aren't many scenarios right now that we're looking at where we think all of our students in our K-12 are going to be in their classrooms like they were this school year. All of our scenarios assume far fewer students in person on a regular basis, some mixture of remote learning for some students who are, particularly vulnerable to this virus, maybe never coming into school. That's true for staff as well. And so I think at best, we're looking at smaller groups of people. We're looking at a combination of remote. We're looking at different ways of earning promotion that are around competency. And again, these are all just ideas. Who knows what's actually going to happen? I think the likelihood of opening looking like what you thought it might look like 3 months ago are just not good anymore. So how do you plan for that? And how do you do that in an environment where the dollars we were promised that we were owed, frankly, for our populations aren't coming through, where it's likely we're not going to see increases in tuition per pupil, where it's likely that the philanthropic community is also down, that giving is going to be down. How do you then have smaller classrooms with more educators in an environment where there's literally less money, billions and billions of dollars less in the coffers of the state? I am not sure how to do that, but I have a lot of faith in the brilliance of our team, in the great colleagues and minds across the city. And so we're going to figure it out. We don't have a choice. Our children deserve us figuring it out. So we'll get there. And I just want to make sure that as we're figuring it out, the folks who can pull those levers, get that rainy day fund going, send more of those dollars from philanthropy, are actually doing their parts as well. Right? We got to do more, not less.
And at the same time, do you think that layoffs are going to be likely because everybody's purse strings are getting pulled really, really tightly right now? Margaret?
Unfortunately, I was just talking to somebody in Boston, and they're talking about, huge budget cuts. And when you talk about huge budget cuts, you're talking about layoffs because there's nothing else to cut. I mean, that's where the money is, in personnel. And when you do, that's the opposite of what we're talking about. When you're laying off personnel and you're trying to have smaller classes, it's, they contradict each other. So that's a real problem. I wanted to just add one thing about the summer is people have to understand kids are going to be outside in the summer. They're not going to stay in apartments.
Yes.
And so we have to decide, are they going to be supervised or not? So people are saying, well, you can't have summer programs because of COVID-19. But kids are going to be outside. So it's better to have programs supervising them so that they're safe than having nothing and having kids in huge clusters and playgrounds and on jobs, and do everything we can to keep them safe in more organized programs, I think, is what we're thinking about. Though people are saying you can't do programs here. Well, they're going to be there. So we want to make sure they're safe, and we want to figure out a way to make them safe. And also that they're enhancement. So there's less summer learning loss.
Yeah.
But I don't know where that money's coming from either. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's a ton to untangle, and there's so much that's uncertain that I think everybody's just trying to problem solve at every level, if they have bandwidth to do so. We're almost out of time, so I just, if you can indulge me and just break out your crystal ball, especially with Thabiti, what you said about a vaccine, that could be a year and a half in the making. So these changes that we're seeing in how we deliver education are likely to keep adapting, keep adjusting. But what could the effect be on education? What do you think the future of education looks like? How could it be forever altered by pandemic schooling?
One of the things I admire about educators is their ability to adapt, right, and grow and change. And it's one of the things I love about young people, right? So resilient, they can always find a way. There are little seeds that we planted right now that have an opportunity to sprout, to germinate, to be watered and fed over the next year that I think can grow into these beautiful trees years from now. And just to name a few of those seeds, there are some of our young people who were not thriving in the school environment, who are thriving in this remote learning environment, who are excited to be able to be in this more individualized, smaller instruction space where they're getting really great attention and support. We got to make sure that we're identifying those young people on a regular basis and giving them the resources they need. There is an opportunity now to call on educators from all over the world, frankly, who can deliver instruction to our young people. We're not bound by this physical space. We got to be able to tap into that. Let's think about what that could look like and where we can go. There are these wonderful chances of linking projects in the world to the classroom. If we have the tools to do that, and if we have the materials and supplies, math becomes building a bridge, right? And ELA is writing a play and performing it. And so we do some of those things at Codman now. I know there are great educators around the world and country who are doing that. We have an opportunity to invest in those pieces and ensure that when we're on the other side of this, we're not losing sight of some of those pieces of beauty that that we can build on. So I'm hopeful. That's one thing that's giving me hope, as well as, frankly, this amazing team that I have at Codman, and these sort of great educators in the Boston Charter Alliance, great colleagues at Boston Public Schools, just great people who are working hard to make sure we figure it out for children.
Margaret, in the minute that we have left, what do you think the future looks like?
Well, I think I agree. I think this could be an opportunity if we open our minds and don't think about school as a classroom, but think about school as the world and how we can use all the resources around us, including other schools, the city, the country, and the world, and how we can bring all of that to our children, not equally, but equitably. And I hope this challenge that we're seeing now does not get lost, but gets used.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us and sharing some of your thoughts. And thank you for the audience for tuning in and submitting your questions. Margaret McKenna, President Emerita of Lesley University, thank you. And Thabiti Brown, Head of School at Codman Academy Charter Public School, thank you as well. And listeners, viewers, you can join us next Tuesday at 6 p.m. for our next WBUR Virtual Town Hall. Endless Thread podcast hosts Ben Brock Johnson and Amory Sievertson will discuss combating COVID-19 related misinformation with epidemiologist Dr. Renee Najera and Harvard professor Joan Donovan. You can register at WBUR.org/events. Thank you so much. I hope you and your loved ones are well.